The Battle of Blackwater stands as one of the most psychologically rich moments in Game of Thrones, not merely because of its scale, but because it exposes the inner workings of power under extreme pressure. Tyrion Lannister, thrust into leadership despite being underestimated his entire life, becomes a study in how intellect compensates for lack of brute force. His preparation of Wildfire is not just tactical brilliance, but also a reflection of his understanding of human fear. He weaponizes chaos itself, knowing that terror can dismantle armies faster than swords. In this sense, the battle begins long before ships arrive, inside the minds of those preparing for it. Fear operates as an invisible general throughout the battle, influencing decisions more powerfully than loyalty or honor. The invading forces, confident in their numerical superiority, are psychologically unprepared for the sheer unpredictability of Wildfire. When the Green Inferno consumes Stannis Baratheon's fleet, it does more than destroy ships, it shatters morale. The sudden shift from confidence to panic reveals how fragile courage can be when confronted with the unknown. This transformation highlights a recurring theme, that the mind is often the weakest battlefield. Tyrion's leadership reveals another psychological layer, the burden of proving oneself in a world that dismisses you. His constant awareness that others see him as lesser fuels both his determination and his ruthlessness. He understands that he cannot afford hesitation, and this internal pressure drives him to make bold, sometimes morally ambiguous decisions. His speech to the soldiers, urging them to fight not for glory but for survival, is less about inspiration and more about tapping into their primal instincts, showing his keen awareness of human motivation. Cersei Lannister's perspective during the battle provides a contrasting psychological narrative centered on control and helplessness. While Tyrion fights to maintain order outside, Cersei retreats into the Red Keep, attempting to control what little she can. Her interactions with Sansa Stark reveal a mind unraveling under pressure, masked by arrogance and cruelty. She drinks heavily, oscillating between fatalism and defiance, exposing how power can be an illusion when faced with existential threat. Her fear is not just of defeat, but of losing identity itself. Sansa Stark's role, though physically distant from the battlefield, adds another dimension to the psychological landscape. She represents resilience through observation rather than action. Watching Cersei's instability, Sansa begins to understand the nature of power more deeply. Her calm demeanor in the face of potential death contrasts sharply with Cersei's panic, suggesting that true strength lies not in control, but in acceptance. This quiet psychological evolution is as significant as any sword fight. The soldiers themselves embody collective psychology under stress. Initially unified by command and necessity, their cohesion begins to fracture as the battle intensifies. The Hound's breaking point is particularly telling. His lifelong trauma associated with fire resurfaces when faced with Wildfire, overriding his loyalty and professionalism. His refusal to continue fighting demonstrates how deeply personal fears can override social roles, reminding us that even the most hardened warriors are governed by inner vulnerabilities. Stannis Baratheon presents a different psychological profile, one defined by rigid determination and a near-obsessive sense of destiny. Unlike others, he does not waver in the face of adversity. Even after the destruction of his fleet, he presses forward, driven by an unyielding belief in his right to rule. This inflexibility is both his strength and his weakness. It inspires his men, but also blinds him to changing circumstances, illustrating how conviction can become a psychological trap. The dynamic between leaders and followers becomes increasingly evident as the battle unfolds. Tyrion's ability to inspire through relatability contrasts with Joffrey's failure to lead effectively. When Joffrey abandons the battlefield, it creates a vacuum of authority, demonstrating how fragile hierarchical structures can be when leadership lacks authenticity. Tyrion steps into this void, showing that leadership is not granted by title, but earned through action and presence. Chaos itself becomes a psychological force, dissolving plans and exposing true character. Carefully constructed strategies unravel in the face of unpredictability, forcing individuals to rely on instinct. This shift from calculated action to reactive survival reveals the core of each character. Some rise to the occasion, while others crumble, emphasizing that identity is often defined in moments of crisis rather than stability. Ultimately, The psychological depth of Blackwater lies in its exploration of the human mind under siege. Every decision, every act of courage or cowardice, stems from internal conflicts as much as external threats. The battle becomes less about victory or defeat, and more about revelation of fears, ambitions, and the fragile nature of control. In this way, Blackwater transcends typical battle narratives, becoming a study of the human psyche in its rawest form. The Battle of Blackwater serves as a crucible in which identities are tested, reshaped, and sometimes destroyed entirely. War, in this context, is not just a physical confrontation but a transformative experience that forces characters to confront who they truly are. The flames of wildfire symbolize this transformation, acting as both a literal and metaphorical force that consumes old identities and leaves something new in its wake. Every character who passes through this moment emerges altered in some fundamental way. Tyrion's transformation is perhaps the most striking, as he moves from being perceived as a political pawn to a decisive leader. Yet this shift is not without cost. The violence he orchestrates, while necessary for survival, leaves a mark on his conscience. His near-death experience further solidifies his understanding of how fragile life and power truly are. The battle becomes a turning point, after which he can no longer see himself, or his place in the world, in the same way. For Cersei, the battle strips away layers of constructed identity, revealing the fear beneath her calculated exterior. Her reliance on alcohol and her willingness to contemplate drastic actions to avoid capture highlight a psyche pushed to its limits. This moment exposes the gap between the persona she projects and the reality she faces. In losing control, she confronts a truth she has long avoided: that power does not equate to security. Sansa's transformation is quieter but equally profound. Observing the chaos around her, she begins to shed the illusions of romanticized nobility that once defined her worldview. The brutality and unpredictability of the battle force her to adopt a more pragmatic perspective. Her composure amidst fear signals a shift toward inner strength, marking the beginning of her evolution into a more self-aware and resilient individual. The Hound's departure from the battlefield represents a rejection of identity rather than a transformation within it. His role as a warrior is inseparable from his trauma, and when confronted with fire, he chooses to abandon both the battle and the persona he has built. This act of defiance is not cowardice, but a reclaiming of agency. By walking away, he asserts control over his own narrative, even if it means being judged by others. Stannis' identity remains largely unchanged, which in itself is significant. His inability to adapt or reconsider his approach highlights the dangers of psychological rigidity. While others evolve in response to chaos, he clings to his sense of destiny, refusing to acknowledge the limits of his control. This stagnation ultimately undermines his efforts, suggesting that survival often depends on the ability to change rather than persist unchanged. The common soldiers experience transformation in a more collective sense. The shared trauma of battle creates bonds, but also fractures identities. Some find courage they did not know they possessed, while others are overwhelmed by fear. These shifts illustrate how extreme circumstances can bring out latent aspects of personality, revealing strengths and weaknesses that remain hidden in times of peace. The City of Kings Landing itself undergoes a form of transformation during the battle. Once a symbol of political intrigue and superficial stability, it becomes a landscape of destruction and survival. This change mirrors the internal transformations of its inhabitants, reinforcing the idea that environment and identity are deeply interconnected. The burning harbor and crumbling defenses reflect the psychological upheaval experienced by those within. The theme of illusion versus reality is central to the transformations that occur. Characters enter the battle with preconceived notions about themselves and their roles, only to have these beliefs challenged or dismantled. The confrontation with reality forces them to reassess their identities, often leading to growth, but sometimes resulting in disillusionment. This tension between expectation and experience drives much of the narrative's emotional impact. The aftermath of the battle is as important as the battle itself in understanding transformation. Survival does not equate to victory in a psychological sense. Many characters are left to grapple with the consequences of their actions and the changes they have undergone. This lingering impact emphasizes that transformation is not a momentary event, but an ongoing process shaped by memory and reflection. In the end, Blackwater is not just a battle, but a turning point that redefines its participants. Through chaos, fear, and fire, identities are broken down and rebuilt, revealing deeper truths about human nature. The psychological transformations that occurred during this event ripple outward, influencing future decisions and relationships. It is this enduring impact that elevates Blackwater from a spectacular conflict to a profound exploration of change and self-discovery.